After witnessing what was a very successful Kickstarter campaign, I put Battalion 1944 on my radar along with a handful of other games looking to bring back the glory of the World War II FPS. Now, Bulkhead Interactive is back with what can best be described as an attempt to recreate the skill-based shooter experience originally crafted by games like Call of Duty 2. And after quite a few hours with the game's most recent alpha test, I'm starting to think the team is going to do just that and do it quite well. I honestly found myself overwhelmed by just how nostalgic my initial experience with Battalion was. From the moment I hopped into the game's firing range, started setting up my key bindings and my mouse sensitivity, pulling the trigger on that Thompson, I was transported back to those good old days, throwing Call of Duty 2 LAN parties in my bedroom, 6 of us squeezed around a couple Xbox 360s, shouting and CTFing the night away. Call of Duty 2 for me, it's a nostalgically legendary experience. It was the first game I purchased on my Xbox 360, and it quickly became our group's replacement for Halo 2, which is not something we took lightly. It was a new gameplay experience on a new console with new tech, and it subsequently had me spending all of my paper route money on additional controllers so we could get as many players together as possible for matches of TDM and CTF. It quickly transcended its existence as just another game and became an unforgettable part of my history with player versus player first-person shooters. Now, with all this nostalgia talk, let me be clear that Battalion isn't just some Call of Duty 2 clone, but it does seem Bulkhead understands better than anyone what made Call of Duty so satisfying, so addictive in the first place. They built an experience here that, unlike so many modern shooters, puts its gameplay, imagine that, its gameplay, at the forefront of its reward loop. You're not just playing to level up, chase prestige, and unlock some weapon skins. You are playing first and foremost for your own personal improvement. This is a skill-based experience that fully understands the value of player skill progression. Bulkhead wants you to walk away from each and every match eager to come back for more opportunities to prove your worth, to progress your skills with a specific weapon or mechanic, to build a better understanding for the maps, their many firing lines, and flanking routes. This is very much an FPS releasing in the modern era that has been classically designed at its core, and I think that's exactly why I found it to be so intoxicating. We've spent far too much time being fed PvP experiences that keep us engaged with arbitrary progression systems. Play 200 hours and unlock this unique banner. I'm not saying games should just abolish those types of player rewards. Hell, even Battalion is going to have cosmetics. Fortunately, cosmetics that make sense for the time period. No pink zebra camo nonsense here. But at some point along the way, these systems took priority over the gunplay, movement, and map design itself. I yearn for a time when gameplay makes a return to the priority list of our first-person shooters, and Battalion is a game looking to do just that. There's actually a rather interesting bit of pacing to be found in the gameplay of Battalion, one that I think absolutely harkens back to Call of Duty 2, but evolves it a bit by introducing a sprint mechanic that increases the overall speed of the experience. One moment you can find yourself peeking corners, crouch walking and listening for footsteps to set up that perfectly planned ambush, and the next you're pre-firing, jump shotting a corner, and trying to control a hip-fire spray mid-flight to rush down an enemy or make a push for the flag. It's this ebb and flow for how you can play Battalion at any given moment that takes what on paper seems like a very simplistic design approach to a first-person shooter and adds old-school nuance and flair to it. There's no concern here for score streaks that reveal player locations or let someone see through walls. It's a raw experience where everything that can and might happen is clear from the beginning of a match. Players, much like they can in a game of cards, are able to make predictions, educated guesses on the actions of their enemy based on their knowledge of what's on screen, and their headphones are being relayed to them by teammates. And when it comes to the guns and gear of Battalion, what you see is what you get. No weapon attachments or mods. Submachine guns are great for shredding opponents in close quarters. Snipers for those snappy one-shot kills at any distance, depending on how good you are. Rifles for that ready at any range approach. Pistols for just the style points, or to be swapped with an enemy weapon to maximize your firepower. And smoke and frag grenades for shutting down lanes and pushing enemies out of position. Actual tactics here. And again, Battalion is taking the simple and straightforward approach to building something that offers depth dependent on players' skill and knowledge, rather than additional and often unnecessary gameplay mechanics. Now, I could talk for hours about the nuances of Battalion's gunplay and design direction, and maybe at some point I'll do just that, but just know, if you grew up with games like Call of Duty 2, you'll likely find yourself right at home, maybe after an hour or so of warm-up and reintroduction. But if you're fresh to this sort of shooter experience, you'll find a game that doesn't go full-on Counter-Strike with its recoil and weapon handling, but that will ask quite a bit more of you than most first-person shooters. It'll give you quite a bit more to learn. It has a learning curve that provides its first hook, its first point of interest for you as a new player if you're willing to give it a chance. So, if you're interested now, I've got you intrigued, and you're asking me, Tony, how the hell do I go about playing this game? Well, let's talk about that. Battalion is actually going to be launching into early access on Steam February 1st for just $15. That's right. I would say that's a bit of a steal, and I think all the more reason to support this type of FPS design if you're at all interested in it. Now, they plan on keeping the game in early access for about a year, hopefully having it come into full release January 2019, at which point they will look at the readiness of the game and push it to the Xbox One and PlayStation 4. It will have a console release where I think the game could do quite well. I'm really excited about that, actually, even though I'll be playing most of it on PC. Now, the early access version of the game is going to include 6 modes, a handful of maps, and 2 factions, the United States and Germany, each with their own faction-specific weapons. It's also going to offer both a arcade or quick play playlist and a ranked or competitive playlist featuring their Wartide competitive mode, which has its own sort of weapon economy that I find quite interesting. I do want to point out that the team is following the Field of Dreams strategy here, as I like to call it. If you build it, they will come, and that's exactly how they're handling competitive and esports play. They want to make sure the tools are there, the platform is there, the community can show up day one and say, oh, this game's actually really fun. You know what? I got a team who plays Overwatch. We'd like to play this. You guys got tournaments going on too? Oh yeah, let's get into this. I like that. I think it's important for developers not to get too caught up in like, we're building it for esports, and to completely neglect the quick play, the more arcade approach to the game, where the majority of their player base will likely be if the game sees large success. But I do think they still should have the tools ready. There's no harm in making a platform for players to dive into. So let's actually take a look at the roadmap, which is pretty well kitted out here, starting with Q1 of 2018 with the game's launch in early access. I should point out that all future DLC will be free. That includes maps, modes, so on and so forth. So at the start, we've got our spring update, which is, again, the game's early access. That's going to see the introduction of a new map for both casual and competitive rotation, offline LAN support, which is going to lead into the summer update, which is all about content. That's got an arcade map, a competitive map, large map support, so maps aimed at a bigger player size, and also the introduction of 2 new weapons. Autumn is going to bring us their second official LAN tournament, a competitive map, a spectator mode overhaul for esports gameplay. Clan Wars is going to launch, which is an in-game clan system for scrims, ladders, and competitive play with high tick rate servers. I like the sound of that. And then Winter, which is seemingly the beginning of the end. They're going to launch theater mode, a new HUD and UI, as well as another casual map. And then that's going to push them into the full release of the game in 2019, which is going to include more free DLC, at which point the team will look for the readiness of the game to push it onto the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. You know, I've been thinking a lot about the return of classic first-person shooters, playing a bit of Quake Champions, hoping that that game, can really take off as it pushes into its full release date, and now Battalion, and really constantly asking myself, can or if we will ever be able to see this type of an experience on the top, or at the very least as successful as a game like Rainbow Six Siege, 80 to 100,000 concurrent players. I think if it is possible, Battalion has a damn good chance to be one of the games leading that charge, especially at this initial price point over on PC. That's a great way to kick things off. I think that is where the community is going to be, most interested at the start of the game's launch. And, if they can have a really good development cycle, free post-launch DLC, they're already communicating extraordinarily well with the community when it comes to feedback, and more importantly, really being specific about how they perceive community feedback and being okay with saying, we hear what you guys are saying, but we want to give you more time with it. That was one of the things that was said about the Wartide mode this weekend in the alpha test, and that just made me grin. I like seeing a dev just come out and be like, listen, you're not always right as the player. It's only been one weekend. Let's give it some more time. We'll think about making changes after that. I loved hearing that. It gives me a lot of confidence. And you know what? That means I'm going to climb on top of that bus. I should say climb inside that bus, pay the bus driver, and I'm going to stick along for the ride. If you guys have any other questions, anything else you'd like to know about Battalion, I have a list of links that will give you all of the information you need right down in the description below. Other than that, keep this game on your radar, and thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one.